Today we will be discussing topic of wide QRS tachycardia, and as we know, it is one of the most important clinically relevant topic, as well as if you are going for final MD exam, this is going to come for ECG for sure. So let's try to learn from expert, and in between or at the end of lecture, you can ask queries to him, and we will see. If something is there today, I have to ask directly. I won't be actively participating today in the discussion. So you can ask her directly for the same. So over to you, sir.
Yeah. So good afternoon, everybody. So today we are going to discuss an important topic, that is a wide QRS, or what is more popularly known as a broad QRS tachycardia. We know it is called wide when the duration of QRS is more than 120 millisecond and the heart rate is more than 100 per minute. It is far more commoner than the narrow QRS tachycardia, excluding the atrial fibrillation, because the structurally abnormal heart are more common than the structurally normal heart, which produce a narrow QRS tachycardia. So I will try to go slow because this is one of the most common thing, not only in the exam wise, but in the practical purposes. We see a lot of ECG with a broad QRS tachycardia in our ICUs and in the wards. So let's discuss in, yeah. So whenever you get a ECG or get a patient with broad QRS tachycardia, it is very important to know the underlying history. Because if you have a patient who has a history of heart disease, like a history of previous MI or a previous underwent angioplasty or a previous scar in the myocardium, or a history of angina or a history of heart failure, then the chances of the ECG being a ventricular tachycardia is almost 95%. This is in comparison to the people with structurally normal heart. So if you see a ECG with wide QRS tachycardia and you have a structurally normal heart, then out of 10, 8 times you are likely to pick it up as a ventricular tachycardia. So 80% of time, if you tell that it is a ventricular tachycardia, it will be correct. However, if you have a history of a heart disease or a structurally abnormal heart, 95 to 98% time you will be right in calling it a ventricular tachycardia. The second important points are patients with tachycardia, ventricular tachycardia, or older than the SVT. This is a general statement. However, not always all of them may be true. Like a patient who has a structurally normal heart, or a idiopathic ventricular tachycardia, or fascicular tachycardia, or a outflow tract tachycardia, they tend to be younger and with a structurally normal heart. Though overall the VTs are more older than the SVTs with aberrancy. Also, if a patient SVTs, they tend to have a multiple previous episodes, and the history will be longer compared to a VT, which usually present when they present with the first episode. Also, as compared to ventricular tachycardia, which are more commonly hemodynamically unstable with a history of heart disease, patients with SVT with occurrences are usually hemodynamically stable. Again, the exception being if a patient with structurally normal heart, there the VTs are usually hemodynamically stable. Now, the most important thing is whenever you see a broad QRS tachycardia, always look for the clinical triad of AV dissociation. The AV dissociation, which we see in almost 20 to 25% of patients with ventricular tachycardia. The triad is we see a Canon A waves in JVP. That is, the atria will be contracting against a closed tricuspid valve, and there will be AV dissociation. Second, there will be variable intensity of the first heart sound, and there will be systolic BP variation, which is unrelated to respiration. All this because the atria and the ventricle are not related to each other, and they are contracting in a non-synchronous fashion. So this three triad clinically is very important in a patient with AV dissociation. We know in a patient with otherwise also incomplete heart block, which has AV dissociation, we get something known as Canon A waves, which are usually irregular and with a bradycardia. However, in VT, the Canon A waves are in a tachycardia and they are usually irregular. Now, most of this wide QRS tachycardia, if they are SVT with aberrancy, they usually terminate with physical maneuvers like the carotid sinus massage and with some medications. So this is how, based on history, you have to see the wide complex tachycardia. As I already told, it is a wide QRS when the QRS duration is more than 120 and the heart rate is more than 100. However, not all of them are sustained. Few of them may be in non-sustained. That is what we called it, non-sustained ventricular tachycardia, where it lasts less than 30 seconds. So in non-sustained VT is what occurs for less than 30 seconds in duration. Yeah, so this is a prototype, sorry. Yeah. So when we see a ECG with wide QRS tachycardia, there are a lot of differential diagnoses. However, we should always keep in mind that the two most common are ventricular tachycardia and SVT with aberrancy, and that is what the today's class is all about. We have to differentiate a VT from a SVT with aberrancy based on some 10 odd features or a criteria. So we'll come to it. However, as I already told you, 80% of the time, if you tell it's a VT, you will be right. And in a patient with structurally normal heart, 95 to 98% time, you are right in picking up a VT just by telling it is a VT. The other rare differential diagnosis include a SVT with bundle branch block. Like if a patient has pre-existing right bundle branch block or a left bundle branch block, and if a patient develops SVT over that, then it will be a wide QRS tachycardia. Also, if there is any SVT with a delayed conduction due to the drugs, like a class 1A and 1C antiarrhythmic drugs, or if it is a hyperkalemia, then we can get a wide QRS tachycardia. Also, the rare causes being antidromic AVRT. This we'll discuss in later sometime in maybe some other class, where we know we have a AVRT, that is atrioventricular reciprocating tachycardia. We have an accessory pathway from the atria to the ventricle. Normally, this pathways conduct both the sides. However, so rarely this pathway may conduct only antigradely, and rarely it may conduct only retrogradely. A antidromic AVRT is one where the atria to ventricle, the conduction is usually via the accessory pathways, and back from the ventricle to the atria, it is via the AV node, and that is why it is called antidromic AVRT. And because the antigrade pathway is via the accessory pathway, we usually get a wider QRS as compared to the orthodromic, where the normal atria to ventricle conduction is via the AV node, and that is why it is a narrow QRS. This antidromic AVRT is usually rare. It occurs usually 5% and less of all the patients with wide QRS tachycardia or all the patients with AVRT. Now, the rare other causes being a pacemaker mediated rhythm, which is very easy to pick up on a ECG because you will get the pacemaker spikes and the underlying history of the pacemaker. Now, these are the regular QRS, wide QRS tachycardia. We know as a dictum that any irregular wide QRS tachycardia is usually AF with pre-excitation. So if you see any wide QRS tachycardia which is irregular, 99.9% time it will be AF with a pre-excitation. However, there are two other rare causes of a irregular wide QRS tachycardia, which includes any irregular SVT with aberrancy or a bundle branch block, and the VT patients with VT in the first 30 seconds due to the variation in cycle length, you may get a irregular wide QRS tachycardia. So these are all the causes of a wide QRS tachycardia. However, in today's class, we are just interested in the first two diagnoses, that is a VT and a SVT with aberrancy. Now, this is the one of the ECG. I will come back to all this ECG again at the end of the class. So when you get a patient with a wide QRS tachycardia, these are the 10 points on the basis of which you have to decide it is a VT or a SVT with aberrancy. Before going to this point, I always mention that you should always see the underlying patient, whether the patient is hemodynamically stable or not. Hemodynamically unstable patient, you are more likely dealing with a ventricular tachycardia patient. Also, if you see that the patient is having a history of ischemic heart disease, or if the patient has undergone stenting or a bypass surgery, or on the echo you see that there is a left ventricular dysfunction, or there is a scar, or there is akinetic ventricles, then most 98% time you are likely to be right and to be calling it a ventricular tachycardia. After this, when you still have a doubt, you see the ECG, and these are the points based on which you have to decide whether it's a VT or a SVT with aberrancy. Now, coming to the first criteria, that is a QRS duration. Now, this is though we all the wide complex tachycardia are wide, there is a QRS duration above which it becomes VT is more likely than SVT with aberrancy. Like if the patient has a LBBB morphology of a wide QRS tachycardia, that is the V1 and V2 are negative and the LBBB morphology, and you have a QRS duration of more than 160 millisecond, or in patients with RBBB morphology of ventricular tachycardia, if the QRS duration is more than 140 milliseconds. So a LBBB with QRS 160 and a RBBB with a QRS duration of 140, then you are very likely dealing with a patient with a ventricular tachycardia, and this criteria has a sensitivity of 70%. Now, there are fewer studies which were Valence showed that the 69% of VT have a QRS duration of more than 140, and none of the SVT showed a QRS duration of more than 140. So a SVT with aberrancy, it is very unlikely that the QRS duration will be more than 140 milliseconds. Now, there are always exceptions, because most of you would have seen a typical ECG of a patient with fascicular VT or what is known as a septal VT. So that if the VT, ventricular tachycardia, is arising near the septum, more it is near the midline, that is from the fascicles or near the septal, the QRS duration will be shorter. So a patient with a fascicular VT, which has a typical, not very broad, but a QRS duration in between 120 to 140 millisecond, and you have a right bundle branch of morphology with a left axis deviation. So a RBBB with a left axis deviation and a structurally normal heart, the most common, the diagnosis will be a fascicular VT. Also, if the patient is on any antiarrhythmic non-specific non-specifically, it prolongs the QRS duration. So the moral of the slide is, if the QRS duration is narrow than the 140 millisecond, however more than 120, then you are mostly the VT you are dealing with is from the origin of septum. So again, I will come to this ECG later in my class. So this is the white complex tachycardia. So if the VT origins close to the interventricular septum, like a septal or a fascicular VT, it is more simultaneously ventricular activation and a more narrower QRS. However, the more away it is from the interventricular septum, there will be sequential ventricular activation and it produces a wide QRS. So that is the typical of a duration of QRS. Now, the second most important thing, which I think most of you will be seeing in a patient 12 lead ECG, is the QRS axis, because we have a tendency that see the AVR. The AVR, though it is a very neglected lead, we know. However, in a patient with wide QRS tachycardia, there is a good significance of the lead AVR. So we see that a positive QRS is, we tend to jump into the diagnosis of VT. Most of the times you may be correct. However, we should always remember that there are many morphological and other criteria based on which we have to decide. However, the QRS axis, if there is a constant plane of QRS axis, that is minus 90 to plus 180, which we know, which we also called as no man's land on a ECG. It is also called a northwest axis. Then you are very likely to be dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. So a northwest axis or a positive AVR, if you have a only positive AVR without any Q, without any S, and you have only a R wave on a positive wave in AVR, you are dealing with a patient with mostly a ventricular tachycardia. Also, many a times when you see a patient with wide QRS tachycardia and you see that the baseline ECG of the patient, there is a significant shift of the axis. So any shift in QRS axis of more than 40 degree from the baseline, you may be dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. However, the specificity is very less of this point. So a change in axis from the baseline of around 40 degree or more is very more likely that you are dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. I think one of the very important point in a patient with ventricular tachycardia is any ECG where you see a LBBB morphology, however, the axis is a right axis, or you see a RBBB morphology VT and axis is left axis, you can very confidently tell that you are dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. So any RBBB with the left axis and any LBBB with right axis, you're dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. Also, suppose if a patient has a baseline ECG of RBBB and the VT ECG is LBBB, or the vice versa, then also you are most likely dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. So these are important thing about the QRS axis which you should know. However, always remember that none of the criteria has a 100% sensitivity and a 100% specificity. Now, third important point again, which I think most of you will be looking, is the concordance of QRS in the chest lead. We know that if it is all positive concordance or if it is all negative concordance, the chances of the ventricular tachycardia is very high. However, always remember that out of all the criteria, the specificity of this criteria though is more, the sensitivity is the least of all the criteria, that is the concordance. We know that either a positive concordance or a negative concordance means it should be all positive or it should be all negative. Means there should be no capital R, capital S pattern, RS pattern, that is R and S wave should not be there in any of the lead. So if that is the case, you are more likely to be dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. However, it is the positive concordance which is more commoner than a negative concordance. And a positive concordance means the ventricular activation begins the left posteriorly, and so the VT is arising from the left posterior wall. Also, if you have even SVT with aberrancy, with a rarely with a positive concordance, then you may be dealing with a left posterior accessory pathway in that sense. So always remember, if you have a positive concordance or a negative concordance, though the chances of DT is very high, the sensitivity of this criteria is very less. So this is how the ECG is. You can see my cursor. You can see from V1 to V6 on the right hand side, it is all a positive concordance. As compared to the left hand side, you can see V1 to V6, it is all a negative concordance. There are many other points on this ECG, which I'll be discussing one by one. So this is all a positive concordance and all a negative concordance, which means it is more likely to be a ventricular tachycardia. Now, again, coming to this ECG, you see this ECG here is not all positive concordance, and here it is not all negative concordance. You see the lead V1, it is RS, lead V2, it is RS. It's everywhere. However, other leads like V4, V5, V6, it's not purely a positive or a negative. It is a more typical of a RS pattern. So when this is the case, you should not tell that it is a SVT with aberrancy. However, you should still go and finding the other points for a VT in such case. Means not a positive or not a negative concordant doesn't mean that it is SVT with aberrancy. It can still be ventricular tachycardia. So you have to find out other points like a AV dissociation is there or not, or the morphological criteria, which I'll come to it. So we'll come to all this ECG once again at the end of the session. Now, as I told you, a concordant QRS in limb lead. So there is, as I told you, a positive AVR or minus 90 to plus 180 tells a northwest axis. There is one more point in the ECG which can tell that it is definitely northwest axis. That is a predominantly negative QRS leads in lead 1 to 3, not V1, V2, V3, but limb leads 1 to 3. If it is all negative, then again it is a way that it is a right superior axis and it is highly specific for VT. So you can see this ECG on my left on the lead 1, 2, 3, it is all negative. So it is all negative, it means it's a right superior axis and it is more likely to be a ventricular tachycardia. Also, if you can see the AVR lead, which is all positive, which has a very high specificity and sensitivity in picking up a ventricular tachycardia. As I'll come to in the next few slides, most of us have a habit of just seeing a AV dissociation on ECG and telling that there is no AV dissociation, it is not a ventricular tachycardia. However, I would like to again emphasize the fact that AV dissociation is seen only in 20 to 25% of patients with ventricular tachycardia. 80% of them don't have a AV dissociation. That doesn't mean it is not a VT. The presence of AV dissociation is highly sensitive and specific for VT. The absence of AV dissociation doesn't rule out a ventricular tachycardia. So in this slide, we have seen that the limb leads V1, 2, and 3 have negative QRS, which means it's a right superior axis, and there is high likelihood of this ECG to be a ventricular tachycardia. Now, again, one of the important is the RS duration criteria in the precordial lead. It's not a pericardial, it's a precordial RS duration criteria. So if you see a ECG, and if you see that there is some RS complex, as I already told you, the presence of RS complex does not rule out a ventricular tachycardia. The presence of a RS just says that it can still be a SVT with aberrancy, but you have to find out other things to make it a VT. So when you have a RS pattern, you can see in this ECG, the patient, my cursor is showing the patient has an R and S pattern. Then from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, if the duration is more than 100 millisecond, if the duration is more than 100 millisecond, it means the chances of VT is very high. It is 98% of the time it is a VT, and the sensitivity is also 66%. I think all this thing which I am telling you just tells one thing, that the VT more likely traverses from the muscle to muscle. And when it travels from muscle to muscle, the intrinsic or deflection or the tip of R to the nadir of S, the duration it takes to travel is very high. The ventricular activation time is very high, and so the duration from the beginning of R to the nadir of S is more than 100 millisecond. So in a patient with a RS pattern, not positive or concordant, negative concordant, but a RS pattern. If from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, if the duration is more than 100 milliseconds, you are more likely to be dealing with the patients with ventricular tachycardia. So this is one ECG where you should ideally not apply this because it doesn't have a RS pattern, and so we cannot usually apply this. Now let's go to the morphological criteria. So what is the morphology criteria is in a patient who have a RBBB type of VT. So a VT which is RBBB type means it may be arising from the left ventricle, or a patient with LBBB where it arises from the right ventricle, more commonly we know. So a RBBB morphology has few things which tells that it has to be a VT. Now what are that? A only R pattern. So you can see down, if you have only R, or a you have a rabbit ear pattern, means the first R is always second taller than the second R. So if you have a first R which is taller than the second R, it means you are dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. This is in comparison with the RBBP pattern where the second R is usually taller than the first R, or a R dash is more taller than the R, then you are dealing with a patient with SVT with aberrancy. However, a pure R or a RBBB with the first R more than the second R, or a patient who has a QR, a small q and a tall R in V1, these are the things which suggest that it is a VT, and the specificity varies from 85 to 95%. So if you have a RBBB pattern, and if you have in V1 any of these patterns, then this suggests that it is a VT. Now, the second important thing is, so in this again, it is one of the same ECG where I showed you. It is a RBBP pattern. You can see V1 and V2. It is a RBBP pattern, and we have a pure tall R. So a pure tall R in this sense usually tells it is a ventricular tachycardia. Now you can see this ECG again. We have a RBBP pattern in V1, and that first R is usually second taller than the second R. So a first R taller than the second R usually is consistent with a VT. And as I told you, you can see here there is RS pattern. So a RS pattern doesn't means a absence of a positive or a negative concordance doesn't rule out a ventricular tachycardia. However, it just tells that SVT with aberrancy is possible. However, we have to find the other features. So the other features are, if there is no AV dissociation, the third criteria you have to see is the intrinsic point deflection. So you can see from the beginning of the R to the nadir of S, it is definitely more than the 100 milliseconds. So from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, it is more than 100 milliseconds. So it means the chances of ventricular tachycardia is very high. So when you see the V1 pattern with RBBP, you should always see the V6 also, because if you have a RBBP in V1, then the V6, you have an RS pattern, then the RS ratio or a deep S in V6 or a RS ratio less than 1 with a RBBP pattern suggests that it is a ventricular tachycardia. So if you have RBBP in V1 and V6, if you have a RS pattern with a ratio of R to S less than 1, that means you are more likely to deal with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. I won't confuse with you all the patterns. However, just remember that a RBBP with a deep S or a RS ratio, if you have a small R and a deep S, it means you're dealing with a patient with ventricular tachycardia. Again, the same thing, if you can see in this ECG, there is a, though there is no, there is RS pattern, we have to see other feature of VT, which is a RS R dash pattern, means RBBB with the first R, which is taller than the second R, and R by S ratio in V6 is less than 1. So this suggests it's more likely to be a ventricular tachycardia. Yeah. Now again, I will again come to all of these ECGs in the end. Now let's discuss what happens in a patient with left bundle branch block. So if you have a left bundle branch block, the ECG, it is more, just to be very clear, it is more commoner to have a RBBB morphology of a wide QRS tachycardia than LBBB, because most of these VTs in a structurally abnormal heart arise from the left ventricle, and so they are the RBBB of a morphology. Now, when you have LBBB morphology, you do not have too many criteria to have a diagnose in the precordial leads. However, if you have a LBBB and if your V1 shows a intrinsic notching or slurring, and it means the intrinsic point deflection from the beginning to the midpoint of R is very more. It means it is a ventricular tachycardia. This again just suggests that the ventricular activation time is more. So the ventricular activation time is more, and it travels from muscle to muscle, and that is why you get a slurring or a notch in the midpoint of LBBB or a QRS. And that is why in V1 you get a small r and deep S with a notch, and the intrinsic or deflection is very high. Now, with this pattern, if you see a V6, which is again a small q, any q in V6 in a patient with LBBB tells that it is a ventricular tachycardia. So, if you're dealing with a patient with LBBB, you are getting a small r and a deep S with a slurring or a notching in lead V1, V2, and a V6 shows any q. It means it is a ventricular tachycardia. This is in comparison to the SVT with aberrancy, where though you have a small r, the duration of a small r is not more than 40 milliseconds, and there is steep or a sleek or a quick downstroke as compared to, because it travels from the accessory pathway and not from muscle to muscle. Also, you do not get any Q wave in patient with SVT with aberrancy. Now, again, I will go to the same LBBB. Of the ECG. Yeah, so you can see this is a ECG with LBBB. You can see LBBB pattern, but the R, small r, the duration is not more than 40 milliseconds, and you have a steep or you have very fast downstroke. It is not like a very slow downstroke. So there is no slurring in the QRS. So it is more likely to be a SVT with aberrancy. However, you again go to all the criteria. You have a RS pattern. Still, you have to search for features of VT. So when you search for features of VT, we do not have AV dissociation. We have to see the morphology criteria. So this is the LBBB. However, there is no slurring in the QRS. So it means the chances of SVT with aberrancy is high likely. See, I would have kept 10 ECGs in this forum. However, as you know, the chances of SVT with aberrancy is very less. So even if you have a collection of 100 ECGs, you will get only 20 ECGs with SVT with aberrancy. 80 ECGs are more likely of a ventricular tachycardia. So a collection of SVT with aberrancy ECGs are less likely than a collection of ventricular tachycardia ECGs. So this is one of the, maybe one of the few ECGs which has a SVT with aberrancy in it. Now, this is one of the, again, a criteria which has a high specificity is the ambiguous leach's lead pattern. We know that a W pattern or a M pattern. M pattern means M pattern is nothing but a RBBB where the first R, rabbit ear. So first R is always more than the second R. And it has been very highly suggestive of a ventricular tachycardia. And as I told you, W pattern. So a W pattern with a W, the slurring in the QRS, and then a small peak, and then the second peak. That is known as the LBBP pattern, and that is highly ambiguous for a ventricular tachycardia. Now, just to be a spotter, this is one of the ECG I know that we are more commonly dealing with VT and SVT with aberrancy. However, if you see one ECG, as I told you, this is a broad QRS tachycardia, which is definitely irregular. So any broad QRS tachycardia, which is irregular, you have to consider a diagnosis of AF with pre-excitation, because 99% of time a broad QRS tachycardia with irregularity suggests a AF with pre-excitation. Now, it is very less likely that you will encounter such type of ECGs. However, when you encounter and the patient is hemodynamically unstable, the first treatment remains the cardioversion. However, if the patient is suppose hemodynamically stable, it means that you have to give drugs. And you should always remember that in such cases, you should avoid drugs where you increase the conduction through the pre-accessory pathway. So the drugs like beta blocker or calcium channel blocker or digoxin be avoided because they decrease the conduction. They decrease the conduction via the AV node, and they increase the conduction via the accessory pathway. And then this AF and all may terminate into a VT and VF, and it may be life-threatening. So you should always use drugs like a procainamide or a propafenone or a ibutylite in such cases. So this is one of the, again, a rare ECGs I wanted to be diverted off the track so that you should just not know SVT or a VT, but you should always remember that a irregular white QRS tachycardia always suggests a AF with a pre-excitation pathway. This is again the same ECG in a smaller frame. Now, again, coming to the sixth important criteria is the presence of a Q wave. Now, this is one important thing, because whenever you see a white QRS tachycardia, you should always see the patient baseline ECG. Now, why that is important is, one, as I already told you, the baseline ECG will give you an idea of what, how much access there is a change. So if the patient has a LBBB morphology VT and you have a RBBB on baseline ECG, means it definitely suggests a ventricular tachycardia. If the patient has Q waves in ECG and suggestion of old MI like R loss in ECG, or a patient has Q wave in inferior lead suggestive of an old inferior wall MI pattern, then it means that there was a structural heart disease and the old MI and the VT is the most likely diagnosis. So this is the importance of a baseline ECG in patient with wide QRS tachycardia. However, in generally the patient with post MI VT, they maintain the Q wave even during the wide complex tachycardia. That is one important thing. However, there are important some exceptions to this rule. If a patient had dilated cardiomyopathy, then even if you do not have a baseline Q wave, they may have a baseline, they will have a Q wave during the ventricular tachycardia. That is one important thing. Also, you may get in patient with SVT with aberrancy a pseudo Q wave with a retrograde P wave. So a pseudo Q wave with a retrograde P wave deforming the QRS may be seen in patient with SVT with aberrancy. Also, the patient with SVT with aberrancy with posterior connection, they can have Q wave in inferior lead, that is also called as a delta wave. So a delta wave can be seen in inferior lead which has a posterior accessory pathway, left or right posterior accessory pathway. So that can have a, that can be, that you will be most of the time, many a time people confuse with the inferior wall MI. So they tell that it is inferior wall MI, that is, but though it is a negative delta wave. So that is few important things about the presence of a Q wave in ECG. Now coming to the most important point which I have been telling again and again is the presence of AV dissociation. And as I already highlighted, if you get a AV dissociation, 98 to 99% of the time you are correct that it is ventricular tachycardia. However, if you do not have a ventricular AV dissociation, only 20% of the time you may be correct that it is not VT. It can still be VT 80% of the time. So only 20% of the patient with ventricular tachycardia have AV dissociation. Now, what are the clues for this AV dissociation is, as I already told you, see the patient clinically, you get a Canon AVs which are irregular, then you get a variable intensity of the first heart sound, and you get a variation in systolic blood pressure which is unrelated to respiration. So these are the typical clinical points in a patient with ventricular tachycardia. Next is AV dissociation. So what typically is AV dissociation is, you see more QRS than a P wave. So there will be hidden P waves in the ECG. One, it is always dependent on the experience of the observer. If only if you look carefully, then you will get. Second, try to look at the look in the lead, which is very obvious. So a lead where the QRS morphology is very good. You see those lead. Many a time we see AV dissociation in leads like AVR. So that is one important thing. See in a good way, it depends on the experience observer, in observer's experience. Many patients with very high rate, VTs are going at around 250, 300. You may be able to miss a AV dissociation. Also, if the patient has both AF and a VT, it is very difficult sometimes to get to see a AV dissociation. So you get a AV dissociation with the atrial and ventricular rate ratio of less than 1, and you get sometimes a 2:1 AV block due to the retrograde conduction. So if there is a retrograde conduction, you may get a 2 QRS and 1 PV. So that is known as a 2:1 VA block. And sometimes because of the high rate, and because there is a cycle change in cycle length every time because of the atria and ventricles are contracting asynchronously, there will be a variation in QRS amplitude. So it is a QRS alternance and not the electrical alternance which we see in other conditions. There will be a QRS alternance during wide complex tachycardia. There is also something known as the fusion beat and capture beats. What is a fusion beat is, sometimes during a ventricular tachycardia, when the ventricle gives an activation complex, at the same time there is there from the atria also there is an activation complex, and both of these fuse, and the resultant QRS is something between a normal beat and a VT beat. So that is known as a fusion beat. And there is also something known as a capture beat, which is a premature beat from the ventricle, which you closely resembles the normal intrinsic QRS morphology. So that is a capture bit which has a intrinsic QRS morphology. And rarely in a echo or in a esophageal atrial electrogram, you may be able to see the features of VT like a RA contraction in relation to the ventricle. So these are the clues for AV dissociation. Now I'll be discussing in detail each one by one. Now, as I already told you, you can see this ECG. Uh, yeah. So this ECG has uh, this is a oh, sorry. So this is the patient with a AV dissociation. You can see my pointer on the long limb lead 2. As you go, you can see few of the P waves. So these are the way. This is one ECG where there the AV dissociation is very obvious. So in such cases, I think it may not take you much time. Hardly it will take you 10 seconds to diagnose that the given white QRS tachycardia is ventricular tachycardia and not the SVT with aberrancy. So you can see the clear cut P waves or a AV dissociation. So in such case, the ventricular rate is around 215, atria rate is around 125, and so it's obvious that the AV ratio is less than 0.58. It's not the ratio and all which you should know. It's just that the AV dissociation you have to look for in such cases. Now again, as I told you, there is 2:1 AV conduction. So you can again see this ECGs for after every 2 QRS there is a hidden P wave. So there is 2:1 AV conduction, which we see in 15 to 20% of the patient with ventricular tachycardia. Now, as I told you, if you see that variation in amplitude of QRS during the white complex tachycardia, and it is related to the presence variable ventricular filling in presence of AV dissociation. So when we have AV dissociation, the ventricular filling is variable, and that is why the QRS morphology varies in amplitude. Now again, you can see this ECG, you can see the limb lead, you have a multiple small P waves which are actually suggestive of AV dissociation. One more important thing which this ECG has, I can show you with this. This is something which is very likely to be a fusion beat and not a capture beat, because the morphology is something between a normal intrinsic beat and QRS complex. So it's more likely to be a fusion beat in this ECG. And you can also see that there is a QRS amplitude variation. So these 3 points are usually suggestive of a ventricular tachycardia. If you can see again this ECG, in this ECG again, if you see there are few of the sorry. So these are the fusion beats. I thought I had some. Yeah. So this ECG again, sorry. So this is the ECG where there is a very typical capture beat. You can see this beat. The what is written as C, it is a capture beat. You see the white QRS which has a duration of around 120 to 140 millisecond. However, you see this C which has a intrinsic morphology, something like a premature beat, and that is why it is a capture beat as compared to this beat which has a morphology in between this capture and the white QRS beat, and that is why this is the fusion beat. So I have already told you the mechanism of the fusion and the capture beat. So this is something which is very important. Apart from the AV dissociation, the presence of a fusion beat, presence of a capture beat, and presence of a 2:1 VA conduction, and a variation in amplitude of QR, that is QRS alternate. These are something which are very important to tell that AV dissociation is there. Now, there are some caveats of using the AV dissociation. As I already told you, AV dissociation has a sensitivity or specificity of 98%. However, the sensitivity is very low. However, its sensitivity further low is low due to faster heart rate. In presence of fast heart rate, sometimes it is difficult to pick up a AV dissociation. And if the inadequate duration of recording is there, and most importantly, it is the experience, observer experience. Sometimes even if a AV dissociation is there, we may be likely to miss it if we do not see it very properly. Also, 30% of the patient with VT with low ventricular rate have 1:1 VA conduction. So if there is 1:1 VA conduction, we are more likely to miss a AV dissociation in those ECG. Also, AF and VT coexist, then AV dissociation cannot be diagnosed. So these are the few caveats of AV dissociation we should always know. Now coming to the baseline QRS prolongation. If a patient with baseline QRS rhythm and the white QRS, which is different, as I already told you, if a patient has RBBB morphology of VT and you have a baseline ECG which is LBBB and the vice versa, then it is more likely to be a ventricular tachycardia. Also, the QRS during VT is usually narrower than the baseline rhythm. That is also one of the important things. So if a patient has a bundle branch re-entrant tachycardia and the impulse originates in the right bundle branch block, so it travels through the left bundle, and that is why it has a typical feature of a LBBB, and that is what it is, typical suggestion of VT. Now, coming to a lead, which I always tell is a neglected lead, is lead AVR. So I think one of the time, apart from acute MI, when we see that AVR is positive and there is diffuse ST depression in all other leads, which most of us know that there may be a diagnosis of left main coronary artery disease or a multivessel coronary artery disease. White QRS tachycardia is one of the important time when you have to see the lead AVR. Most of the time we know a positive QRS means a right superior axis, and that is why, or a northwest axis, and it means it has to be a VT. However, that is not the only thing we are interested in lead AVR. There are many other things in lead AVR which is important and tells that it is a ventricular tachycardia, and what is known as a Verrecki criteria we should always know. So if there is a presence of an initial R wave in AVR, it means it may be suggesting ventricular tachycardia. Second, if there is a presence of an initial R or a Q with a duration more than 40 milliseconds, because we know ventricular VT travels from muscle to muscle, the initial Q or a R may be more than 40 milliseconds in duration. Also, if you have a negative QRS, we know that most of the time a negative QRS suggests that it is not likely a VT and it may be SVT with aberrancy. However, a negative QRS with a notch in the descending limb of QRS of negative onset, it means that most likely we are dealing with a ventricular tachycardia, because again the when VT travels from muscle to muscle. And then fourth criteria is VI by VT. I'll come to it with the help of an image. So let's see a few of this. Now, as I already told you, uh, this is one of the ECG which we know. I'll come to the most important algorithm of VT, which is known as the Brugada algorithm. Most of us will tell this as a SVT with aberrancy just seeing the AVR algorithm. However, as I told you, if you see the RS pattern in the leads, that means there are chances that it can be SVT with aberrancy. So second thing, you have to jump to the next criteria which is the presence of a intrinsicoid deflection. So we knew from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, it is not more than 100 milliseconds. So we move to the third criterion Brugada. I will come to it. Then that is the presence of AV dissociation. In this ACG, there is no AV dissociation. So the fourth is presence of a morphological criteria. In morphological criteria, we know in presence of a LBBP pattern, we see that a small R whose duration is not more than 40 milliseconds, and there is no slurring in the QRS. It means that it is not suggestive of a VT. Also in V6, there is no Q wave. If in V6 with LBBP, there is a Q wave, it suggests a ventricular tachycardia. It means that more likely it suggests a SVT with aberrancy. And that is why our QRS, we see a QRS AVR, where the QRS is negative and there is no slurring in the, no definite slurring in this. So that is what is one of the important thing. Now, again, going to the same criteria here, when we see this ECG, will be telling most of the time, because AVR is positive, it is more likely to be a ventricular tachycardia. Let's again apply the Brugada algorithm, where the first point is the presence of a RS complex. So in this ECG, we do not have a very typical RS, but in V4 to V6, if you see predominantly negative QRS, it means you are more likely dealing with a patient with the VT. So we do not have a typical RS pattern in any of the leads. So second, so here the likelihood of VT is very high, because in the first step only, you do not have a RS pattern. So the chances of ventricular tachycardia is very high. So which is confirmed by the fact that though the second R is taller than the first R, we have a RS ratio with RBBB or a deep S in V6, which suggests that it is a ventricular tachycardia. Or also we have a tall AVR which is definite positive. It means it is a ventricular tachycardia. Now I was telling you in AVR, you should also know something known as the VI by VT. That is the voltage in the initial 40 millisecond of QRS and the voltage in the last 40 millisecond of QRS. Now the why it happens is in SVT only one portion of bundle branch is blocked, and so the initial portion of QRS is rapid compared with the terminal, as compared to a ventricular tachycardia where there is slow muscle to muscle spread of impulse, which causes a slower voltage up throughout the QRS. So the first initial part we know there will be slower conduction. So in the first 40 millisecond, it may be the voltage will be less as compared to the final 40 millisecond, where the voltage will be more in patient with ventricular tachycardia. Here we can see the typical that it is very difficult, this thing, so you have to take it very carefully. So if you see, suppose here, so in the first 40 millisecond, you see that the VI, there is a 40, there is almost four small box, so it is 0.4 as compared to the last 40 millisecond, which is only 0.2. So a VI by VT more than 1 suggests SVT with apparency, whereas a VI by VT less than 1. So you have to see the voltage in the first 40 millisecond and see the voltage in the last uh, 40 millisecond. It is very difficult to calculate this. That is why I told you, you have to see the other important points, like a positive, if there is a tall or a only positive QRS or is negative QRS, such as SVT with aberrancy. If you have a small q or a small r with the duration of a q or a r more than 40 millisecond, it is suggestive of a VT. So these are the important things about the lead AVR. And finally, when you come to the one of the last criteria, which is the lead 2. So in the lead 2, the R wave peak time. So if you see this R wave from the beginning of the R to the peak of R, we have a around more than 50 milliseconds, which suggests that it is a ventricular tachycardia. It is known as the Pavas criteria. So R wave peak time in the lead 2 is a high sensitive criteria that differentiates the SVT with aberrancy. It is one of the, again, one criteria where we should just know it. However, it is just to remember, and not where we don't use it practically in all our cases with white QRS tachycardia. Now you can see this ECG in lead 2 from the beginning of R to the peak, it is more than 50 millisecond, and that is why it is highly likelihood of it to be a ventricular tachycardia. Just in this ECG, just to apply, okay. So there are various algorithms which we use in a patient with WCT: Valence, Acta, Brugada, Griffith, Bayesian, AVR, and lead to RVO peak time. However, just to know, the most important criteria among all this, which has high sensitivity and specificity, is the Brugada algorithm. And in the next 20 minutes, I'll take you through all of this ECG using the help of Brugada, that how do we differentiate. It is a case of SVT or a case of VT using the criteria. However, there is one more important algorithm which we use more commonly, is the AVR algorithm. So let's go to the Brugada criteria first and then come one by one to each of these ECG. Now, the first step which I have been telling you in all the ECG is the absence of RS complex in all precordial leads. In the all precordial lead, if you have absence of RS pattern, it means that it is very there's a specificity of if being a VT is very high, that is 100%, and the sensitivity is very low. That is what I told you. It may still be SVT with aberrancy, but you have to see the features of VT. That is why we go to the step 2. So in the patient, if you have RS pattern, then you see from the beginning of R to the nadir of S if there is more than 100 milliseconds. If it is yes, then again your sensitivity is increasing from 21%. You have come to around 66% sensitivity. Now, if you do not have a more than 100 millisecond, come to the third wave, which is AV dissociation. Now, if you have a AV dissociation, 98% time it is there are chances that you have a VT. If there is no AV dissociation, go to the morphologic criteria, which we have already discussed. And if the morphological criteria is mixed, here you are equally sensitive and specific to be calling it as a VT. So at the end of 4 criteria, it is 98%, 99% almost sensitivity and 97% specificity of it being a ventricular tachycardia. So this is the Brugada algorithm. I told you what is the Verrecki algorithm, which is the AVR criteria. Is you see the presence of an initial R wave, a initial tall R wave in AVR or a positive QRS complex. It means the chances of VT is very high. If no, still it can be a SVT with aberrancy or a VT. So you see the initial R or a Q. So it has to be small initial R or a small Q, and the duration should be more than 40 milliseconds. Then again, you are dealing with a VT. If no, then you see a notch on the descending limb of a negative onset QRS. And if you see a notch, it is a VT. And if no, then you see a VI by VT. If a VI by VT is less than 1, it is a VT. And if it is no, then it is a case of SVT with aberrancy. So though we do not use very commonly the AVR criteria, if you use it along with Brugada criteria, the chances of VT is very detecting a VT is very high. So this is what I told you just now about the Verrecki algorithm. So the best algorithm for diagnosing a VT is a Brugada, AVR, and a Verrecki combined criteria. That is the old and the new AVR criteria. So in all the cases of VT, try to find a reason to diagnose VT, because in a patient with a structural heart disease, 98% time you have to be diagnosing a VT. So 98% of the time, try to find a reason why it is VT and not SVT with aberrancy. And 80% of the time with absence of structural heart disease, you have to get a VT. So 20% of the time only your SVT with aberrancy will be right. So you have to find all the reason to diagnose that ECG as a ventricular tachycardia. Now I would like to go to each of these ECG again, try to discuss at least 6 to 7 ECG one by one. So I will try to apply Brugada algorithm. To be frank, I do not know the diagnosis of any of this ECG. However, if we apply the Brugada algorithm, 98% sensitivity and 96% specificity. However, there is still 1 to 2% chances that we can still be wrong in any of this ECG, and that is why the electrophysiological studies are made to confirm the diagnosis of a in the rare conditions where a ECG cannot pick up. So let's apply the Brugada algorithm one by one. So this is the ECG. We have to see whether there is a RS complex. So there is RS complex. So the first the step of Brugada, that absence of RS in any of the leads is not there. So it can still be a VT or a SVT with aberrancy. So the second point was the presence of intrinsicoid deflection from the beginning of R. So this is the beginning of R to the nadir of S. So from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, it is more than 100 milliseconds. So the chances of VT is very high. So from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, the duration is more than 100 milliseconds, and that is why it is a ventricular tachycardia. So here we do not have to go to the third step, that is the AV dissociation. However, you can see that if we see very carefully, there is no AV dissociation. And if you have to go to the fourth step, which is the morphological criteria, you can see that a V1, there is RS, R dash, the first R is usually tall with a V6 R by S ratio is less than 1. So it is the ventricular tachycardia. However, in this case, we have to stop at the step 2, because from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, it is a more than 100 milliseconds. So it is a VT ECG. Now let's go to this ECG again. So again, I think before the most of the time how I deal with the ECG, if I see in any ECG, if I see a RBBB morphology with the left axis deviation or an LBBB morphology with the right axis deviation, it is more commonly I diagnose it as a VT. Most of the people have a tendency to directly jump onto the AVR and see that is a positive QRS, though it has a high sensitivity. We should not directly jump to the AVR lead, because it is just an addition criteria to the existing Brugada. However, if you see that you are definitely seeing a AV dissociation, that is the presence of P waves in between, and AV dissociation is there, then you are very likelihood of it telling it a VT. However, if none of this is there, I suggest that we should go in all our ECG with the Brugada algorithm, see the V1 again. So do you have a positive RS in all the precordial lead? There is no RS in all the precordial lead. So we can see in V2 to V4, as I already told, it is all negative, almost a negative concordance in most of the, and there is no RS. So the chances of VT in this ECG is very high, and that is why we should not try jumping into the next criteria of the Brugada algorithm. However, still if we jump to the next criteria, the second is the beginning of the R to the nadir of the S. However, if that can be applied only if you have a RS pattern. So here, as we do not have RS pattern, we may not be able to apply it. Still, if you leave the AV dissociation, the third part, the fourth criteria point of the algorithm remains with the RBBB pattern, the presence, there is a small R and a deep S. So the ratio of RS is less than 1, which suggests a ventricular tachycardia. So this ECG is again a ECG of a ventricular tachycardia. This ECG I have already told, but for our discussion's sake, let's come to the Brugada algorithm. Is there a presence of R to S? So there is RS in few of the precordial leads. So if there is a presence of R to S, So the first point is ruled out. It is still it can be a VT or still it can be a SVT with aberrancy. We have to go to the second point. So from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, is the more than 100 millisecond? No, it is not more than 100 millisecond because this is R and this is S. So still it is around 60 to 70 millisecond. So it is not VT. So we have to go to the next point. The next point is the presence of AV dissociation, which is this ECG I cannot find. So go to the morphological criteria. The morphological criteria says if you have a LBBB with a small r and s, QRS with a notching. So there is no notching in this ECG with the LBBB pattern, and there is no Q wave in the V6. It means that it is not a VT but a SVT with aberrancy. So going by this Brugada algorithm, 98% time and 96% sensitivity, we are right that it is a SVT with a aberrancy. Let's go to one or two more ECG and then we may, yeah, let's go to this ECG. So in this ECG again, let's see, as I already told you, see, this is a ECG where already we have a pointed AV dissociation. So it has to be a VT, whatever you said and done. So let's apply the Brugada criteria. Absence of RS lead pattern, no, there are R, there is S. So after this, it can be SVT with aberrancy or it can be a VT. Going to the point 2, if there is a RS from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, if it is more than 100 millisecond, is it yes? No, it is not more than 100 milliseconds. So it still can be SVT with aberrancy, still can be a VT. Now we have to go to the third point, that the presence of AV dissociation. So we have presence of AV dissociation. So the Brugada algorithm is met. So on the third point, we have diagnosed it as a VT. So again, we have diagnosed this ECG as a VT using the Brugada. However, in this case, I think you may not need to go to the 3 points of Brugada algorithm. In the first point itself, you can see the presence of a AV dissociation and tell that it is a ventricular tachycardia. Okay, now coming to this ECG, yeah. So here again, I'm sorry, my few of the sidewise it is cut. Again, anyway, yeah, this is the same ECG. I think we have already discussed. Yeah, same ECG we have discussed. Oh, so yeah, let's discuss this ECG. So again, coming to this ECG. Yeah, so the first point of Brugada is there an absence of RS pattern? Yes, in this we have all the precordial lead with few negative here, but in lead V3 we have a presence of RS pattern. So if the presence of RS pattern, we are definitely, it can be SVT with aberrancy or a VT. Go to the second point, from the beginning of R to the nadir of S, is there a more than 100 millisecond? No, so it can still be SVT with aberrancy or a VT. Is there a presence of AV dissociation? I can see, can you see this? This is the presence of P wave. This is the presence of P wave. So we have, and this is the P wave. We have a feature suggesting AV dissociation, and so it is more likely that this ECG is a VT. Again, coming to this ECG, so we'll stop at this ECG. We see this ECG going to the Brugada algorithm, then definite there is no RS pattern. So it has to be a VT. However, let's counter check with other things. Go to the point 2, we cannot use the RS pattern with R to nadir of S because there is no RS. Third, is there AV dissociation? No, there is no AV dissociation. Can we apply the morphological criteria? Yes, we have a positive only R in lead V1, which tells that it has to be a VT. So it is very definite that this has to be this ECG is a VT. This ECG we discussed, it is a AF with pre-excitation ECG. This ECG we have already discussed. This ECG we have discussed. Yeah, let's discuss this ECG once before concluding. So V1 to V6, there are definite RS pattern in all this lead. With R to S, there are chances it can still be SVT with aberrancy. Now let's go to the second criteria, which is from the beginning of the R to the nadir of S. Is it more than? So most of these places we can see that there is a notching in this, and from the beginning of R in some of this lead, yeah, like here it is not more than 100 millisecond from in V4, V5, V6. So still it can be SVT with aberrancy, still it can be a VT. Going to the third criteria, AV dissociation. Is there a AV dissociation? So it is very difficult to see AV dissociation. So go to the fourth, that is the morphological criteria. So if you have a RBBB pattern with a V6 R by S ratio less than 1, we are more likely to be dealing with a patient with VT. So this is more likely a patient with a VT ECG because there is a pure tall R wave in this. So this is a VT ECG more likely. So these are the things which I wanted to conclude to say. I think we have seen enough ECG, and most of these ECGs were SVT, and except one or two ECGs which were SVT with aberrancy. So the moral of the story being, if you try to use these algorithms, you will be very wisely diagnosing the ECGs with the VT or SVT with aberrancy. Use AV dissociation only if it is there to directly diagnose it. Don't go jump to the AVR to see that it is a only positive QRS and so it has to be a VT. Use the other criteria also. And if the patient has LBBB morphology with right axis or RBBB morphology with the left axis, most of the time it has to be a VT. So I will conclude here. If any questions are there, I'll take.